All right, we're back. And we just finished talking about arrays and lists, that collection type. You know, when I was a kid, I was always dreaming about when I was playing Dungeons and Dragons, you know, because I was a big role-playing guy, right? Tabletop games. I always wanted to have some kind of tool to help me build my characters and keep track of things like non-player characters, NPCs, right? Because we did all that kind of stuff all the time. We never had access to Visual Studio when I was a kid. We did things with BASIC, you know, and we did things by hand with other languages. So we did that. I actually created those kind of things, but it was very long and it took forever to make an interface with the tools that we had at the time. Luckily, with Visual Studio, we can create an interface that creates almost like a character builder-esque experience fairly quickly. All right, so how do we do that? First, let's make a new project. So I want to make a character builder. Now, this can be for any game system. If you're a person who likes to play a tabletop game, so I'm going to go to Windows. Again, I'm going to open up a Windows form application, and we're going to call this just the name of the class. So it's COMP1004, Fall 2016, and we are Lesson 5. So I want to make this character builder, and I'm starting off with this simple form. Now remember, when I first start off, what's the first thing we do when we create stuff, project with Windows Forms? What the first thing we're going to do? The UI, right? The UI is the first thing we're going to do. And the reason why is we can rename the form, but the first thing we're going to build is the UI, and we're going to rename the form. Thank you for that. And when you guys do the exam, and I give you your UI to build, right, there's going to be two parts, UI, and then there's going to be a bunch of functionality, right, that's tied into the UI. Make your UI function for, like, put all the stuff, all the elements in there first. So to have those marks, right? Because remember, it's going to be a timed exercise. Even if you have 3 hours like we have today, you may think it's a lot of time, but truly there's not a lot of time, especially when you want to test stuff and look things up online, see how things are going to work, whatever. So get good at placing items or UI elements in the form. Okay, so the first thing is we're going to rename this thing, and I want to start off with the actual ability generator itself. So we're going to rename this form. So I'm going to go File, and we're going to go to Rename, and we're going to call this Ability Generator Form, or maybe we'll call it Ability Form. How about that? Ability Form. Okay, so remember, we're generating some kind of character. It could be Dungeons and Dragons. It could be something else, and we're going to generate the abilities, right? Okay, we're going to talk about some stuff to do here. So I know the form is going to be a little long, because I'm going to have these 6 abilities, right? So, and there's different ways of doing things. I'm probably going to make this so it's a little larger. So what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to right-click for the form itself. I'm going to go to my properties of the form. Here we are. I'm just going to unpin the Solution Explorer for a second. But in the properties of the form, I want to look at the font first. So I want to say, well, my font, you know, maybe I'm going to make it so that it's something a little larger. I'm going to use Lucida Sans again, just because it's a nicer font than a little softer than everything else. I could use something else, like if anything that's inside of my that I have inside of my system, right? That's compatible will be listed here, right? Now there's some weird fonts that you have as an example. Even though you may have them available to you, they may not be compatible with Windows Forms, so they may not be listed here, right? Like for example, I know that I have, if I start typing Helvetica, right? I know I have Helvetica Neue, right? But it's not here. Right? So I can't type that font. But if I type any other font in here that I want to use, I'm just going to use Lucida Sans because it's a little nicer, like I said, a sans serif font. What? Overrated, Helvetica. Well, like I said, you know, I mean, I don't want to use something like handwriting. Handwriting is a little bit difficult to see. I'm probably going to make it something like a 14 or 16, that size. Here it is, and I want to resize the form. So first I make it, then I resize it back to what it should be. Okay, so this is my form. I want to add my tools now. So back to my toolbox again. We're talking about UI creation, right? So it's just techniques. What would I do first? So I want to add some tools. I want to add a label, chances are, and then alongside that it's going to be some kind of a text box, right? So here's my label, and my first label, it's going to be the strength label. So I'll rename this thing strength label. I want to have access to that. You could make, if some people say in some circles, they say, well, just leave it as label 1, who cares, right? But for me, I like to kind of put in, there's 2 ways of doing this. You can say strength, right? That's the first ability score for Dungeons and Dragons, right? Actually, a first ability score for many game systems out there, strength, just the way things worked out. Or some people may use a short form like STR as something that they put on their character sheet. For me, for some people who don't know Dungeons and Dragons, I'm just going to use the full word, strength. Okay. I'm also going to do the same thing with the input box or text box. Here's my text box. We're going to line these things up. And notice I don't need too big, but I want to kind of line it up for the size of my word, just from an aesthetics perspective. It is already the right size, but I'm going to call this the strength text box, right? Strength. Text box. There you go, strength text box. All right, so I've got those two things, and I want to make kind of everything else. I know that one ability is really long in Dungeons & Dragons, Constitution. It's really, really long. That's why they use abbreviations for some of this stuff. So I want to do that. So it's strength, usually Dex is next. So let's grab these two things, copy, paste. So copy, paste, there we go. Put that underneath there, right? And we'll realign this stuff later on. So this one obviously would be the Dexterity label, right? Dexterity label, yes?
You do not recommend like SDR label or Dex label at all?
You know what? It really depends on the programmer. In my programming house, for us, I'm going to say no, right? To make it really long and wordy, so you understand what it is, but not because you couldn't do it. Or in some places, they may recommend that you reduce it. Even in the book, they tell you instead of a label, they use LBL and TXT, right? I don't recommend that though. Sometimes it's confusing, right? So dexterity. It is. But that means that it's limited by the it changes according to the programmer, right? And what I'm doing is I'm creating a practice. It may not be the best practice for you, but it's the practice that we're using. All right, so let's go back to dexterity text box, and then everyone's the same this way. If I say you can do whatever you want, then everyone's not the same. If I put you on another person's computer now, you can look at it and go, oh, there's a problem. It's not named properly, right? Okay, so we got dexterity as we're building our UI, and copy paste. This is the long one, Constitution, and I want to point this out because sometimes you have a long label that you want to line up. This is just, again, we're building UIs, right? And I have an idea for how I'm doing it. I'm doing it on the fly, which is not normally how we do this. Yes, Constitution, it's really long. And we have the name, instead of dexterity, we have Constitution. Constitution is like your vitality, if you will. So I want to kind of make this text box kind of as long as Constitution. It's pretty long. I don't need all of it, but I want to make them kind of big, right? Now you can design it whatever way you like. You can design it so that the strength is on the left, the label, and to the right is the text box. And for you to do that, you could design it like this. So you can say, well, my form is to the my input, or the whatever is going to show is to the right of my label. And then you can align the labels so that they're kind of on top of each other. And see the red line, if I align stuff, the red line kind of indicates the bottom of my label, and this line indicates that I'm on the right line with my other text boxes, right? Now, I'm going to realign this in a second, but you can see that if I want to, I can now I can stack these things. Oops, undo. I can stack these things one under the other. That's not what I wanted with my poor imitation of a machine. If I don't want to, if I want to do one of these, right, and if I want to make these all smaller, like this, I could realign them all at once. So I can drag all these things all at the same time, as opposed to doing it one at a time, right? So here's another way we can do it, right? Which also looks okay. So it saves a little bit of space. Yes.
Shouldn't they be read only, the text box?
We'll do all that. So, and that's a good point. If I want to, should I be able to type in my own abilities? And depending on the kind of character sheet you're making, we're going to make one that's randomly generated, where you can't put the ability in, you can only swap abilities, right? So we need something in there. We need this to be a read-only, right? So if I go back to read-only, I'm clicking on these three text boxes at the same time, and I can change them all to true. But that means I want the look and feel of them, the back color. If I go to the back color, instead of control, right? I don't want the back color to be control. I want the back color to be white, right? There's my back color. There we go. And I can also choose my border style. Instead of fixed 3D, I can just say fixed single to make them look a little bit simpler, right? I could also disable the object, right? So if I go to enabled, I can change that to false. And then you can see that there's, when I run this thing, even if I run it now, you can see that you won't be able to type in there. I won't be able to modify the form at all. I can't even click on it, right? These objects, right? So I can't even click in there. And that's what mine looks like, right? So far. Okay, we're still building. I want to do a few more. So again, copy. I'm going to take this one, the longest one, and paste. You can see the label goes back down.
We want to add a formula to that text box. Would it disable the formula, or?
If it was built into the text box on the user interface side, yes. If it's built in on the back side, no. So here's the second one and the third one. So there's a couple more. I noticed that when I copy paste, it kind of took the label out. So I'm doing two objects instead of one, right? So again, this next one is intelligence label. And we're going to call this intelligence. Sorry, guys, so that we're, it's like watching paint peel, but this is what we have to do. Right? And this will be the intelligence text box. Okay, good. And here is the wisdom label. And the wisdom text box. Again, if you're not familiar with D&D, don't worry about it. Just follow along. Right? These are just abilities for the character. So we're talking about role-playing game, a desktop role-playing game that we're playing. Right? It's not a computer game necessarily. Charisma label. And this is charisma text box. Oh, I got to change the actual text of this one to charisma. And this will be charisma text box. Going as fast as I can here. Charisma text box. Good. So I've got my containers for my form. One thing I'm missing for the form itself is definitely a couple things. I don't want my start position to be the top left. I want it to be in the middle. So I'm going to make the center screen, typical. I'm also going to change the form name. So it says ability form. Here's my ability form. That's what it's going to say at the top of my form itself, right? And what I want as a button, so here's what I want it to do, and I want you to figure this out too with me, okay? I want a button. When I click on the button, I want to roll the dice, right? And then it's going to put the ability scores randomly in the position that I want, okay? So I need a button for that. So I'm going to grab my button, put it in here, and then size it out so it makes sense. So here's my button. And we're going to call this roll, right? The roll buttons. Well, maybe we'll call it roll ability button or roll button. Call it roll button. Maybe the name of the button itself won't say roll, it'll say roll abilities. Roll abilities. There it is. And I'll expand this thing so it looks like this. There we go. Roll abilities. Again, you can size this up a little different. Like you can make the button so it's aligned to the right a little bit, and we can size this up because all we need is this right now. We'll change this up a little later. So that's my form. I've done my UI for my basic ability form, right? I'm not quite done, definitely not, but I've done this part. Okay, now I'm going to put it up to GitHub. I've done my first form. I'm going to upload things to GitHub. Okay, so I'm going to save all. I'm going to test my form so I see that it loads. Yay, it works. I can click on this. Nothing happens right now. Okay, but the basics are right here. I'm going to go into Team Explorer, and I'm going to go to Get Started with GitHub. I'm going to click Create a new repository on GitHub called COMP1004 F2016 Lesson 5, right? And click Publish. And that's going to publish everything to GitHub the way it is, right? I'm also going to do another change because I've added stuff. These are the things I added in, right? And I'm going to add in, so I added, or I'll say updated, or how about this? Created a UI for ability form. Commit all. Home, and then I'm going to go sync and push, which is going to push everything up to GitHub. Yay. No functionality. Okay, so random numbers. How do we do random numbers with C#? Because we're doing random numbers By the way, when we do anything else with C#, hint, hint, Unity, right? We need to know how to do random numbers there too, right? So, well, there is a random number method, but it's kind of built in. So when I click my roll button, that's when I want things to function. Notice that I by accident, I put this Dexterity text box text changed event. I put it in there. How do I get rid of these two events without killing my form? Who remembers how? Yes?
You have to go to Dexterity text box.
Text box. Here's my label on my text box. There it is, right? I did for both of them, right? Automatically. And if you look at the Solution Explorer, where do I click? Or is it on my properties? Where do I click?
Events.
So I click on the events itself, which is, how about this? For the properties. Pull up. Okay, how about we hide the Solution Explorer and pull this up here. So the events are the lightning bolt. We can see that the text change event is there, and we just wipe it out, right?
Yeah.
Wipe it out. We do the same thing for the Dexterity label because we don't want that to be any kind of, we don't want it to have any other thing. Here's the click event for the Dexterity label. We did that one somehow too. That's got to be gone too. And once we've deleted them, and if I click away, and if I go back to the form itself, right, you can see that they're gone. Not there. And then my design won't be broken. Okay. All right, good. So what I want to do is when I click, here's the user story. As a user, I want to be able to click the Roll Abilities button, and it'll generate abilities from 3 to 18, numbers between 3 to 18 that will appear in the ability boxes, which are right here, right? To make the bell curve nicer and to make your job a little harder, because I got to give you a little bit of challenge, I want to use 4d6, the 4d6 method of rolling dice. For those people who don't know what that is what I want to do is I want to have 4 dice, because we generate abilities by using 6-sided dice, right? And instead of generating, using 3 6-sided dice, which is typical, I want to use 4, right? And what we do is we use 4 and we drop the lowest one. There's your list, right? So how do I do that? I need to have an array or some kind of list, right? And each of my list items that I generate, there's 4 values. And what I want to do is I want to sort the list and drop the lowest one. That's what I want to do. All right, that's my code. And we're talking about lists and arrays, which is perfect. That's why I want to do it this way. Okay, so first, I got to double click on my roll abilities to generate the event. There's my event. Okay, so all the fun, all the magic is going to happen with my roll button. As soon as I roll the button, it's going to start my other stuff. Okay. Okay, great. So that's number 1. What do I want it to do? When I click the button, I want to call a method called roll abilities, right? So let's do that. So we'll say call, we don't have this yet, call the roll abilities method, wherever that is, right? We're going to call it, of course, roll abilities, right? And it's going to be a, for now, we're going to make it a public method. All right, I just want to say roll abilities. Now we don't have this method, right? But that's the one. And it's going to turn up red here because we don't have it. Okay. Can we generate it? Well, if I click on this thing, take a look. Click on this thing and press Control dot. It says a couple of things. Generate the method, roll abilities. Let's do it. That's new, right? So we did it the other way around, but I can actually generate the method this way too. So I can go Control dot when it's underlined in red, and click this, and all of a sudden, bam, we got roll abilities as a method, right? So to help us write the code, right? Now we don't need this. This is just a throw not implemented exception, which says, hey, this method hasn't been implemented, right? Which is like kind of a way of notifying us that it's a stub that we've made for the method itself, right? I also want to document my method. I'm going to use the triple forward slash of in order for me to document. So I'm going to say triple forward slash. It's going to create a summary, which this method generates 6 abilities. Taken off? Okay, enjoy. 6 abilities for the character sheet. Okay. So it does. Now, what I wanted to do is we're going to generate the ability, and I want to do it a bunch of times. It's going to be rolled. I want to roll 6 times, and I want to roll 4d6 6 times, right? Okay. So that means I got to roll 4d6, right? And then I want to do that in a loop 6 times, right? So I want to kind of do a loop. Here's a loop. So 4. I want to do, the length is going to be for count. Here's my count. Is less than 6. So it's going to be less than 6. I'm going to roll 4d6 and assign the value, right, to each ability. We could do it with a for loop. We could do it with a for each loop. I'm just running some pseudocode right now to how to do it. Okay, we don't know yet how we're going to do it. Okay, do I have a way of rolling 4d6? Let's assume we do not. So we have to do it by hand. So let's do that. So we'll say I'm going to call another ability roll 4d6. We're going to make that what it's going to be called. Make it very descriptive, right? And right now, that's all it's going to do is call the method. I don't have the method, so I'm going to call it. I'm going to make it by clicking Control dot and generating that method. There's the method, and here we go. / this method rolls 4d6 and returns the highest number between the highest set. The highest or the highest three six-sided 3 dice. 3 dice, let's say. There we go. Highest 3 dice. Okay, so how do I do that? That means I got to be able to roll a random number that generates 3 dice. Yes. You're putting up your hand? No? You're good?
No,
Yeah.
I'm scratching.
All right, so here's where I roll 4d6, right? So I roll 4d6 here. That's when I actually do it, right? I've kind of put it in both places. So this is where I do it, but I assign the value to each ability here. Here I just rolled 4d6, and what I want to do is return. I want to return a value, and it's going to be an integer, right? Because I know this roll 4d6 returns an integer. So this is going to return the value. So this is the result, right? Or the result, not dialog result. We're just going to call it result. I don't have a result, but I know that the result has to be an integer. So integer result. Right? I don't know what the result is right now, but I'm returning it, right? And I could make the result for when I come into this place equal to 0 for now. I can assign it to 0, and then I'm going to roll my 4d6, whatever that's going to be, however that's going to look. Okay? Now, because I do that, I return an integer, which means I got to assign this to a value. So I'm going to assign this to my first ability. Right? Yes. One number. One roll. I'm roll 4 dice, taking the top 3. Okay. Okay. So maybe this is the better. So rolls 4. Oh, how about this? Rolls 4 6-sided dice, and returns the top 3. That's called the 4d6 method of rolling. Okay. All right. So how do I roll 4d6? How do I randomly generate anything? Well, one thing to note is I want to create a variable, right? And I'm going to do it at the class level because I'm going to probably access this variable again and again, right? So I want to call this new variable. I want to use the random class to do that. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this thing random. Okay, so the variable itself is an object of the random class, right? It's called random. And it's a little different the way we do it in C#. Now, notice that the ability form itself, this is the constructor of the ability form, and I'm going to call initialize component. But this is a great place, right? Great place to initialize variables. We can do that somewhere in here as well, right? In the constructor. I like to kind of notice that it says has initialized component. You know, sometimes I could have another method that I want to make that's called I can call it initialize, and it's usually going to be a private method. So I'm going to call the initialize method. I don't have that method in place, but what am I going to do? Click onto it and press Control dot, and it's going to generate the method for me. Right here is my initialized method. This is going to be a private. Notice how it created the method. All the methods so far have been created as private methods by default, right? If I want to make my roll abilities public, then I'd have to change this method to public by default, right? Okay, but for now, my initialize method, I've made it, I've called it, and I want to usually, typically what I want to do is I want to use the this keyword to indicate that private methods or whatever are being called. And maybe I want to kind of use my triple forward slash, say this method is used to initialize class members, member variables, I want to, whatever. And one of them is this random variable, right? Now notice that my random variable is really private, that's by default. And I could make it so that it's underscore, I can add an underscore to the private variable there, right? And I want to make it so that it's an object. It's just note that. It's not, it's because it's not a standard type. It's not a decimal and it's not a double and it's not something else. It's more of a complex object right now, but I need to initialize it, right? So I'm gonna create it inside my initialize method. And I'm gonna do something like this. I'm gonna say this dot underscore random, right, is equal to a new random object, right? So I have to do that. So when the form gets created, I'm going to initialize the random number, seed. Sorry? So instantiate object of type random. That's what I'm doing here. Okay, so once I've got the random object includes, it's a pseudo-random number. I'm not really creating a random number because we never do that typically. And the pseudo-random number, what we're gonna do is it creates a list of numbers, right? That's what it does. A list of numbers that gets predetermined. It's a predetermined list. And all we're gonna do is go to the next item in the list. Okay, so as soon as I instantiate this object, it's gonna automatically seed the object with a random number seed. I don't have to do that. I can if I want, right? And then what it's going to do is it's going to go through, whenever I call the next method of the random object, which is underscore random, I'm going to go under random dot next. I can specify to go to the next value, okay, the next random number. Okay, that's how it works. So if I hover over it, you can see that if I click on this, it's the random class itself that I'm using. And again, if he says initialize an instance of the random class using a time-dependent default seed value. So it's based on the time, on the system time. That's what it does. So whatever the system time does, when it goes to the next time interval, it uses that as the next seed. Okay. All right. So what I want to do down here is to test a random number, a number that I want to do when I want to generate, when I want to roll a number. I can simply go something like this. I need a die result. And if I was going to just do a single die result, let's just make an integer called die, like not dice, but die, a single die, right? My die is equal to this dot underscore random dot next. And notice if I have a bunch of overloads here, right? Here are my overloads. I have the maximum value, right? Now it says, be careful here what it says here. It says, returns a non-negative random integer that is less than the specified maximum. So and then the maximum value, the exclusive upper bound of the random number to be generated, max value must be greater than equal to 0, right? So I'm always going to generate a number that's just less than the number, so up to, but not including the number that I put in here. Example, 6, right? That's going to go from 0 to 6. Yes? Forget it. Don't listen to your ID. Put this in there, right? It's best practices that I'm telling you about. Okay, so that's the first thing. So it's going to generate a number from 0 to 1, 0 to 5, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 1 to it. That's one way of doing it. Or here's the other. Remember, it's an overloader constructor. So if you notice, there's 3 overloads. You can see that. I have 1 out of 3 different options here. The 1 is with nothing. The second one is with a maximum value, and the third one is a minimum value and a maximum value, right? But again, if you notice the minimum value, it says the inclusive lower bound of the random number returned. So if I put in the inclusive, this is included 1. So the minimum value is 1. Now, when I click on the next one, it says the exclusive upper bound, which means it's excluded from the type. So what am I going to put here if I want a number between 1 and 6? 7, right? Because it's excluded, right? This is also the same. It'll generate a number between 1 and 6 every time. Okay? Good. So once I've typed in next and I press open bracket, it gives me code hinting. All right? As soon as I put my open bracket, it's IntelliSense. That's what Microsoft calls it, right? TM. Actually, I think it's registered trademark, or an R, right? IntelliSense, right? So again, there's 3 options. You can put a nothing, but then it would just give you a number between 0 and 1, right? If you did this, right, you would have the maximum value, so 6, and then you can add 1 to it, right? And the other way of doing it is lower bounds and then one greater than the upper bound that you want. So example would be 1 and then 7, right? Because it would be 1 to 6. Okay, here's the question. If I want to generate a number between 3 and 18, can't I just put in 3 and 18 in here? I could. 3 and 19, actually. It would be 3 and 19. I could. But it's not realistic. And I'll tell you why. It's like you're rolling a 3 to 18 die. There's no such thing in real life. And actually, the statistics show that the probability is going to be slightly altered because it's a straight value. The chances of you getting a 3 and 18 are equal if you generate a number between 3 and 18, like randomly. Whereas if I throw 3 dice, the chances are the average is going to be 9, right? The other way, from 3 to 18, all numbers are equally generated from 3 to 18, approximately, right? Which is not in real life, not the way we do it. That's why we generate dice, like 1 to 6. We do this a bunch of times, right? Okay, let's test this. So when I call the number, I want to kind of pump out this value to the console every time. So I need to use the debug statement, debug.writeLine. Remember, we have to do this, but if we do a debug.writeLine and we want to pump out die, whatever the value of die is, right? Notice my debug has no, it's wrong, but if I press Control dot, it gives me this using system diagnostics using statement that I can put in to make this active. And now it's okay, right? All right, so what is this going to do so far? If you look at it, when I click the button, it's going to call the Rollabilities method. The Rollabilities method is going to roll 4d6. Right now it's only 1 die, right? But it's going to do it 6 times, right? And then it's going to generate a number between 1 and 6 and write it out to the console every time the roll 4d6 method is called, right? But it's going to do this. It's going to do this 6 times. So I should have 6 numbers between 1 and 6. That's what it's going to generate right now. So far. Let's see if that works. So run, and we'll see if we get an error. Okay. Random numbers are really cool because they give us probability. Once we have probability, then we can build cool games with it. I mean, that's the essence of every game we play out there right now. Okay, rollabilities. Yay. Here's the numbers. Rollabilities. Yay, here's more numbers. And then notice they're from 1 to 6. If I keep clicking it, I'm going to keep getting other values in here over and over again. And I can test to see that I'm getting random values from 1 to 6. Okay? I know there's a lot of glare. Sorry. Maybe you want to move. Well, maybe you can't move. Or so easily. Right. Makes sense? So now I've got 1 die that works 6 times. Okay, that's nice. But it doesn't get stored anywhere. It gets lost. That's one thing that happens. Right? And I want 4 dice, and I want to drop the other one. List. Okay? Let's make the dice list. This is going to kind of exemplify what we've been talking about this whole time. Okay? So how do we do the dice list? Okay. I want to make a list, but I want the list to be local to my roll d4d6. So it's not going to be a list that lasts for the in my entire form, just here, right? Which means it's going to be a local variable that I need. I'm going to store here's the result. We're going to make the list first. So the list is going to be of type integer, right? An integer list. So I'm going to say list, and then in brackets, in these angle brackets, int. Okay? So make an integer list, which is going to be called dice, right? It's the dice list. So there's a list of dice, or a collection. I want you to think about when I say list, on your mind, I want you to think a collection of dice, right? They're all related, right? That's what it is. They're all integers. And for me to finish this off, I want to do is a new list of integer. That's the form that we saw earlier, right? This is the empty container. And I'll put that in there. This creates or instantiates an empty integer list. Sorry? That's all it is right now. I'm just going through doing it 6 times, right? Make sense? I'll put this up in a second. Once we're done with the logic, we'll do it. Okay. So here I've created an empty list. I want to add, well, here's look, every time I click on this 46, right? I want to do this 4 times. I've only done this 1 time, which means I'm going to do a for loop that does this 4 times, this generating the number, right? That's what this means. So I'm going to do a for loop, right? I'm leaving some space here, so I'll say for, right? And I'm going to say count is less than or equal to 4, right? So 4 dice. And what I want to do here is instead of making this die is the next random number, I want to take whatever the value that comes out of here and I want to add it to the list. How do I do that? Right? Well, I'm going to call the list name, which is dice dot, and what's the command I need to use to add things to the list? Add. Wow, rocket science, right? Add, and now what am I going to add? An integer. It has to be an integer. Well, guess what the integer is going to be? A random number between 1 and 6, right? So I'm going to take this part. I'm going to cut this part out right here. Cut this part. Put it over here, right? And I don't need this anymore. And I don't need this anymore, right? I'm going to put that debug dot whatever later on. Right, so what is this going to do? 4 times. It's going to go through loop 4 times, right? And it's going to add 4 numbers to the list. That's what it's going to do, yeah? All right. What I wanted to do is I want to take the top 4 numbers, the top 3 numbers from the list. But the numbers are going to be generated in random order, right? Random numbers, right? 1, 6, something, right? So I need to perform a sort method on the list, right? How do I do that? I'm going to go dice dot sort, right? And if you notice, there's 4 overloads, right? The one is sort the elements of the entire list, whatever type it is, in this case integer, using the default comparer. I can do that because it's just a simple integer that I'm sorting. If it was some complex thing that I was sorting, an object that I was sorting, I'd have to make my own comparer, another class, right? For now, this is enough. Okay, what does this return? If I look over the sort, it actually doesn't return anything. Notice that the return type is void, which means it actually modifies the order of my items in the list, right? So now I'm going to get in ascending order, right? In ascending order, what is it going to be? From greatest to highest, or from from lowest to highest, or from highest to lowest? What am I going to get? Is it? What's ascending order? It goes up, right? Which means I want to get rid of my first value, my 0th value. I want to pop it out, right? So how do I do that? I can do dice.remove at index 0, right? The first one. Get rid of it, right? If I'm right, okay? First of all, let's see what it generates. And then what I'm going to say is, okay, now I want to add in, I want to sum up the list, whatever the dice is. I want to sum the list or create a total for the list. Could there be some kind of, I'm putting it out there, method that sums for us? Let's see. Dice dot, and if you look, it might be something, right? That kind of, oh, wait a minute, dice dot sum, right? It returns an integer, right? That's what it does, which I'm going to carry into the results, right? So sum of the dice, store it in the result, which means I don't have to do another loop. Otherwise, I'd have to go through and do another for loop and go add this in plus, 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 right? Yeah. I love it. That's what I want to do. And I can do it all on one line too, right? All this in one line, right? But let's hold on, right? Remember, we want to learn how to walk before we fly, right? Otherwise, I'm going to lose everybody, right? I don't want to do that, right? So we have to think what this does. First of all, let's print out, just for our own purposes, all the values of the items we're adding in the list, right? Now, in order for me to do that, I can't add the item in unless I display the list item. So I'm going to say debug dot log. Right, debug dot, sorry, write line. I'll be okay. Debug dot write line. I'm thinking Unity. Debug dot write line dice, and I want to look at the count value, whatever the count is. I want to print that out. So whatever the dice number is, I'm going to print it out. Okay. Okay. Now, just to make it simple, okay, what we're going to do is I'm just going to take these away for now, so it only does it once. All right. So only one time it does it. Otherwise, I'm going to have a bit of an issue. I won't be able to track which one it's going to be, right? Just to keep it simple. And the rollabilities, I'm just commenting them out for now. I'll come back to them and put them back. All right? Why? Because I want to simplify. I'm just testing this one little method right here, this roll 46. So what I'm doing is I'm printing out each of the dies I'm generating, and now I want to also print out the result before I return it. So what's the result? So debug dot write line, right? And I want to say the result is plus the result. So show me what the result is. There we go. So what I should get is, I want to see that it works. I want to see that my method works before I move on, because if I assume that it's going to work, who knows what we're going to get, right? We might get demons killing, you know, cities again, right? We don't want that, right? That's a bad thing. If we don't want demons killing cities, we don't want somehow them to pop up and kill cities. We want to control the computer, make sure the demons kill the cities, but only when we tell it to, okay? Not just randomly. Sure. Yeah, technology is magic, remember? So here we go. Here's our little generator, and I want to watch this window over here and click Rollabilities. Okay, here I go. 2, 3, 2, and 6. What is the lowest number? 2, right? But I have 2 of them. So it should have sorted it in order. 2, 2, 3, 6, which means I should get 5 and 6, which is 11. That's correct. Notice it dropped the lowest one. It dropped the 2, right? Let's try it again. Rollabilities, right? 6, 5, 6, 3. Wow, it's great. So it means that the lowest number is 3, which means I'm not going to use that one. I'm going to take 6 and 6 is 12, and 5 is 17. How does this change the bell curve, right? If I have 4d6, right? If I have 3d6, the average value is about 9. If I take 4d6, the average value is, I think, around 11.5, right? So it actually gives you a couple more points. Makes your characters a little bit meatier, right? More heroic. Call it whatever you like, if you're randomly generating characters like this. Let's take a look and keep trying. So here it is again. You can see that the results are 15. So 2, 5, 6, and 4. 5 and 6 is 11, and 4 is 15. We dropped the 2, right, which is what I want to do. Okay, so it's working. Anyone not understand this, please put your hand up now, because this is where I lose everybody, right? Okay, let's stop. So now that I know that this method works, I can optimize, right? I can start refactoring, right? To do this all at once somehow. Let's just say, right? First of all, I don't have to do this anymore. I don't have to do my debug. I just did that for testing purposes, right? I'm adding items to the list. I'm doing it 4 times. I'm going to sort. I'm going to remove my first item at 0 and then sum everything up. And I'm returning this sum here, result here, and I have a variable that I don't need, right? Like you suggested, I can get rid of it. So let's get rid of this variable. I don't need a variable like this. Cool. Well, if I don't have a variable, then what am I going to do here? Well, what I want to do is return the sum of the dice at the bottom, right? So I'm going to kind of cut this out here, and then I'm going to put that down there, and I've saved a little bit of lines, right? Okay. I'm using lists, and I'm popping the top of the list, right? Top of the list, I'm popping it off, right? Remove that. I could have used a stack, right? I could have used other structures to do very similar things, right? but this is just fine. So let me just kind of compress a little bit. So that's not bad. That's not a bad little algorithm, all right? Chaining methods. I like your thinking. So you're thinking like this: dice sort, and then remove at, right? Yeah, it doesn't give me code hinting, right? If I go dice.sort.remove, remove at 0, it's going to say, meh, I don't understand what you're trying to do. See how the dot doesn't work? If we had our own custom class, right? For example, if I made my own custom dice class, which extended the list of type integer, again, then yes, you could do it that way. But that's a different structure. Okay, this just generates 4d6 and does it once. What I want to do is I want to go and take these things out. And now what I want to do is I want to generate the value. I want to show the value here at the end. So every time it prints out, I want to show what the value is. So I want to do a debug.log because roll4d6 actually returns the value. So I want to say a debug.writeLine. And I want to return the value of my 4d6 roll 6 times. So now I should have 6. All the values I want to populate into my form are going to be right now. I want to have them all right now, right? So roll 4d6. Notice how I did things. I kind of did things like, ass backwards here, right? I put the cart before the horse. First, I generated the roll 46 because I needed it, and then I generated something else because I needed that. And then I went finally, and I got to my reduced to this value right here. Let's check this out and see if it works. All right, so I generate my 46 as my roll abilities. I'm going to look here for my results. I click roll abilities, and bam, 10, 15, 13, 16, 15, 16. Whoa, a hero, right? I made a hero. That's an awesome character. Let's try it again. And not so great. 10, 9, 13, 13, 8, 15, right? And roll abilities again. So 9, 9, 13, 13, 14, 13. Not bad. Average, a little bit above average, right? Now I got to put them in here, and somehow I got to put them here. Okay, strategies. Strategies, okay? I want to be able to store my data in some kind of container class. Yes? I could put the text box in an array. I could. There's a pile of things you can do here that are more complex, that'll make things. You can actually you can procedurally generate everything, right? If you really want to. Let's keep it simple though. I want to be able to store my values, not just display them here, but store my values at the same time in a global container class that I can. That's not going to change. Remember how we instantiate the next form? I need to go and do my class and my race and everything else further down the line somewhere, right? We're going to do this, going forward. How do I do that, right? Well, the best way to do it is, again, going back to one of our first lessons we did, like I think it was day 1 or day 2, we created our own class. I'm going to use the class diagram to help me, okay, to make it quick. So I'm going to go like this. I'm going to kind of right-click on the project itself, the COMP1004 F2016 lesson 5, and right-click. I'm going to click Add. We're going to New Item, and we're going to add in the class diagram. Okay, to help us build this. I'm going to say diagram. I search for diagram. I'm going to click class diagram. I'm just going to take the 1 away down here and press enter. It's going to give us this empty class diagram here, right? But what I want to do is I want to create my character class. Okay? I don't want you to think my character class. Don't think of my character class as the class, like a fighter or a rogue or one. I'm not talking about. I'm talking about like a C# class. All right? And my character class is going to have several properties. Guess what they're going to be? Strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. Those are going to be my properties. So let's do that. So I'm going to say add, right, new class, right, which we're going to call character. Right, here's my character class. All right, cool. My character class is going to have several integer. First of all, should they be integer or should they be strings? What should they be? My recommendation, no. My recommendation is, well, you can make it integers if you want, but I could also make them strings as well because I'm going to be pumping them out, and I can always convert from one to the other, right? If I make them integers, it's fine too. One or the other, you choose what you want. For now, I'm going to make them strings, or sorry, integers. They're fine. So I'm going to say I want to add in a field, right? or a property. Which one should I do? Property or field? I want them to be public. Property, right? Public properties, private fields. My property is going to be called strength. Right? And we're going to do the other ones too. So I'm going to add another one, add a new property. We're going to call this dexterity. Okay, right? Add a new property, constitution. And we're going to add a new property, which we're going to call intelligence. Don't worry about the order, it doesn't matter. Add a new property, which we're going to call wisdom. Then add a new property, which we're going to call charisma. Okay, good. We got all our properties, and we have to. They're empty. I gotta initialize all these things. What do they look like? Because remember, I just generated this thing with my class diagram really quickly. And what the class diagram helps us is to cut time. That's what it's for, right? So it's got some stubs in there. So let's look at my character class now. What does it look like? It looks like this, right? And if I want to order things, you can see that it's ordered exactly how I created it: strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, right? To make it simple, what I'm going to do, right, because I want to make this really simple, is I want to kill all this, right, and go something like this, get set, right? There we go. That's the quick way of doing getters and setters. And I'm going to do this. I'm just going to copy and paste inside there, right next to it, like this. Boop. Keep copying and pasting that. Boop. Do it again. And again. And again. Until I have all my getters and setters. These are public properties because they have getters and setters. And I can expand those getters and setters and define them if I want, or I can keep them like this. It's okay. What was that? I just removed them and just put get set. I just copied over them. You can actually have done a move, find replace too if you want. Okay, so now that I've got my class, I need to use my class. And I want to instantiate an object of my class as soon as my application starts, so I can use it anywhere, right? Okay, and it's not going to be form dependent. It's not about the form. It's going to be used anywhere. How do I do that? Where does it get instantiated? Well, it's got to be in the program, right? My program is the driver class that drives my application, right? If I double click on the program, you can see that it is a static. I got two static things. I got the static class program. I need to make this static class public static, right? Because I want to make it so that I can see the objects inside the class, public static, right? And I also want to make I want to instantiate my character class in here, right, inside the class itself. So my program class, I'm going to make my new character class, right? And I'm going to do something like this. Character, we're going to call character. Hold on a second, I'll answer your question. Do you have a question? Right? And inside my main method, when my main gets generated, because it happens, right? Notice that it says program character cannot declare since instance members in a static class. What do? I can't declare instance members in a static class, right? Because my class is static, right? How do I declare this thing? Sorry? I can, which means it's a utility container. That's what it's going to be, right? Which means I got to make this public static, right? I don't have to instantiate my program class in order for my character class to be instantiated itself. Okay? I need to instantiate it though. I just can't do this, right? I need to instantiate an object of this type of class. And I'm going to do it before I do anything else. Inside my main, before main gets generated, I'm going to say something like this. I'll say character is equal to a new character. Right? Hey, how come I don't have to specify the namespace of my character? Well, because it's inside the same folder structure. Look, there's no folder that the character is inside of. It's sharing the same namespace. Characters sharing the same namespace with program, which is in the same namespace as ability form. So therefore, character is available across my entire application. I'm just instantiating it here, right? Okay. How do I access character now? Because character itself is just a container object that I want to store my stuff in. So when I move from one form to another, right, I always have those values available, right? So I can go back and forth. And I don't have to worry about one form closing and the other one opening, right? Okay, how do I do that? So I'm going to go do this in my ability form, right? Here's my ability form. When I roll the dice, instead of just doing this and pumping it out here, I want to assign this, each of these things, right? Instead of doing it 6 times, like I've done it here. And again, I've done it one way. There's always different ways of doing it. For example, I could have made an ability array, or, you know, that's one thing I could have done, which each ability has name value, key value pairs. I could have created an enumeration for the indices, right? Where I have strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, charisma as part of my enumeration. And I could have used an array. So I use my enumeration to indicate which part of my array. And then I could have looped it in here. I can't do the loop in here because I need to access that class and go to each individual property. So I can't use a loop, is what I'm saying. I need to just put, the way I've coded it, I need to do this. I need to say, I want to roll 46, right? But I want to call this roll 46 method a bunch of times. And I want to do it, I want to assign it to the program, the character class, right? The value. This is what I want to do. So I want to say something like this. I want to say my character, right? But you see that I don't have access to character like this, even though it was generated in my program and it's a static thing. I got to do something like this. I got to say program dot character, right? Dot strength. I'm storing it, right? So I'm going to say strength is equal to roll 46, right? Right? I would have to do each individual one this way. And if I copy this a bunch of times, so another 5 times, and I change from strength to whatever I want, right? You can see code hinting is helping me. Could do this, right? I generate the numbers, right? That's what my rollabilities does. And now somehow I got to transfer those numbers. Here's the conundrum that I have. I got to transfer those numbers back to the actual form itself. So see, I'm duplicating, right? I want you to see it so you can think about solutions here, right? So I do this, and then run underneath. I'm going to have to do something like this: strength text box text is equal to program.strength by character.strength, right? But I want to convert this whole thing. This is an integer, right? That's why we made it. Convert to, or actually it's just toString. That's what I have to do. Sorry, strength toString. I got to do. Make sense? I got to do that every single time. This is one grouping, right? And I'm going to do that every single time, right? Like this. So instead of strength, it's going to be the different abilities, right, over and over again. This is brute force. And you think about a better way of doing this without having to do this over and over again. Once you see this, when I'm duplicating, I'm repeating myself, something's wrong. Guaranteed, 100%, right? So you see a lot of the same stuff. I'm still accessing my character over and over again. I've got my strength, dexterity, constitution, but I got to change these ones too. This has got to be the same thing. Dexterity, right? Constitution, intelligence, and wisdom, charisma. That's a long way. Is there a better way of doing this? Hell yeah, huh? I could do it that way. I could use, like I said, enumerations would be the one that would help me here. Enumerations. right? Because if I use the enumerations, I could use a loop, right? Because the enumerations will represent an index. So strength would be index 0, dexterity would be index 1, constitution would be index 2, and I could use the enumerations to help me with which index it is inside my array, and it would just be an ability array, as opposed to this, right? And we'll do that next week, right? Because we're going to run out of time in a second. But let me show you how it works now, so you can see the ability's been generated, right? Let's just roll this and see what happens. So I've got this. I click roll abilities, and I got 1. Oh man, what happened to dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma? Did I make a mistake? I didn't change the strength text box, right? So I got to go back here and go, like what I'm saying, look at the repetitiveness, right? So this is going to be, look how brutal this is. Dexterity text box, right? And this is, like you said, maybe you want to use an array of text boxes. There's different ways of doing this problem. Constitution, text box. That's probably wrong. Probably spelled it wrong on the constitution. That's spelled right, but it's probably the text box is wrong. I'll have to fix it. And this would be the intelligence text box. And that's correct. And wisdom text box. And my charisma text box. And you see the errors, right? Those errors are not me, right? It's when I first did it, when I first created on the ability form itself, right? So, what is it? It's constitution and wisdom. So constitution, the text box. If I go to my properties and I pin it, and I unpin the solution explorer, and I go to properties, I can see what it's called. It's called text box 1. I didn't change the name. I don't know why. Constitution. Text box. And the other one was, you can see that okay now? And my wisdom text box is the other one. I don't know how that got missed. Wisdom text box. Wisdom text box. Yeah, text box 3. Wisdom box. There we go. All right, now let's run it. Yay. Let's run this thing and see if this thing generates our abilities. Whew. I know it took a long time, but we've got a lot of things going on, right? And I had a lot of requirements. Roll, 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 roll. Good luck. 3 18s. There's one. That's a really good character. I can work with that one. Right? That's pretty good. 18 and 16.
There you go. That's character.
Oh, you signed it?
Just
Here's something that you want to do. If I'm rolling the character, you may want to generate this for the first time, right? So on low, that's why I separated them. This is why we do this, right? On the back end, notice that I call roll abilities when I click, but roll abilities should also be called on form load. So here's my form load, right? I should also call my roll abilities, this dot roll abilities, right? So that way, when I run my form for the first time, it'll just do it right away for me. Questions around this, the stuff we've done today. So we covered arrays, and we covered lists, and I showed you an example of a list, right? And the protruded example was random numbers. We did random numbers today, right? And how to do random numbers, and how to produce stuff inside of a form. Any questions around this stuff? It's not that difficult, guys. And girl who's not here. Yes. Gabe is looking at me like it's really difficult. Yes.
I'm honest.
Huh? The character sheet. The character. I'm going to put it up on GitHub for you. Okay. All right. One other thing that I want to do before I finish off is I noticed that these things aren't centered. So the other thing you can do before you leave is you could center all this. So if you go to the alignment, so text alignment, you can see the text line is left. That makes no sense. We want to center the text so it looks like in the middle. And if I start, you can see now that everything is centered, right? So it looks a little nicer, right? And now when I roll the abilities, they all kind of center on top of each other, which is kind of cool. And they're being stored in the character sheet. Actually being stored on the character class itself. All right? So let's upload to GitHub, and then I'll see you guys next week. Remember, next week on we have a short week. There is no class on Monday for you guys, right? Because it's Thanksgiving. Friday is when your assignment 2 is due. Next week, Friday, right? If I'm not wrong. At midnight, yeah, at midnight. So you have another week to get it done, which shouldn't be a big problem with this. Okay, give me 1 second. Let me just finish off. So I'm going to go to GitHub, and then I'm going to go to changes. And you notice I've added a character class. I did a bunch of stuff here. So I said added character class and ability form logic. Ability form logic. There we go. Oops, logic. Commit, home, and sync, and push. And then we should have everything up online. Guys, thank you so much, and see you next week.